Welcome to Kate's Take from galsguide.org. Each week I talk about a movie that has shaped my life, and I'll teach you how to dissect a movie and find the life lessons hidden within. Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties because it's cold outside. Hello and welcome back to Kate's Take. It's February 2nd. It's Groundhog's Day. So what better movie to talk about today than the Harold Ramis classic, Groundhog Day? So released in 1993 and starring Bill Murray and Andie MacDowell, this film has all the hallmarks of a classic, worthy of repeated viewing. I mean, it's funny, it's incredibly insightful, and it has a holiday in the title, so you know that cable channels will want to show it every Groundhog Day. It also has the movie trivia question that everybody wants to know, which is just how long was Phil Connors stuck in the time loop? Today, I will be answering that question as well as deep diving into massive insight that is in this movie. So if it has been a year since you have watched this movie or you just finished it a few minutes ago, I will give you a refresher. Phil Connors is a weatherman from WPBH Pittsburgh who is sent on assignment to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania to cover the world's most famous weatherman, a groundhog, whose name is also Phil, and he predicts if there's going to be an early spring or 6 more weeks of winter. It's Phil's 4th year in a row covering the Groundhog Day event, and he is not happy about it. I'm going to assume that maybe he feels like a rodent doing his job is insulting, but also Phil is an egotistical prima donna that doesn't like people or animals or children or small towns. And so when Phil is trapped in the town of Punxsutawney by a blizzard, he wakes up to find out it's actually worse. He's trapped in the same day. So he reacts first with forcefulness. He pins a guy to the wall in the hallway asking him what day it is. He also tries to explain déjà vu to Mrs. Langston, who runs the B&B, who says she'll ask the kitchen if they have any. He also asks his producer, Rita, to slap him in the face and to wake him up from what he feels like is a very bad dream. He tests his existence by perception, and he breaks a pencil before going to bed, puts it in front of his clock, and in the morning at 6 a.m., the pencil is not on the nightstand, and when he finds it, it's in one piece again. He tries a more rational approach. He explains the situation to Rita, and then to a doctor, and then to a shrink, and then to a couple of drunk guys at the bowling alley. So when he learns that there are no consequences for whatever he does or doesn't do in a day, he punches people in the face. He eats whatever he wants. He uses the curse to pick up women, rob an armored car, and kidnap the groundhog. He goes through an existential breakdown. He tries to kill himself over and over again. A toaster in the bathtub, stepping in front of a truck, jumping off a building. He mentions more, but this is what we see in the film. Phil then thinks he's a god, and not the god, but a god, and we'll come back to this. But when Rita hears that, she wants to help. Phil reveals that he doesn't deserve Rita's help, but he wants to be worthy. So he then starts to help others, and when he does, he finds happiness, and he is released from the curse, and he finally reaches February 3rd. So before we deep dive, I'm going to hit some surface level fun trivia stuff for you. So the script was written by Danny Rubin, and it was picked and reworked by Harold Ramis. The first script was, quote, not really makeable, according to Ramis, and he had to work to make sure that the script was more entertaining and more accessible to audiences. Apparently, the script had started first with Phil already stuck in the time loop, and then explained that Phil was underneath a curse or a spell from an ex-lover. It also ended with Rita actually stuck in her own time loop as well. So the first idea was that Phil was going to be stuck on February 2nd for 10,000 years. So just how long did Phil spend in Punxsutawney during the movie? Well, it is just a movie, and there are conclusions that we need to jump to because we have to account for things like how long does it take to learn ice sculpting? So luckily, the YouTube channel What Culture calculated it with great detail, and I will put a link in the description so that you can see the whole video. But they came to the conclusion that it was 12,395 days. Another way of saying it, 33 years and 350 days. So that is nearly 34 years stuck in the same day. And that gets quite tedious. And we will come back and talk about tediousness in a bit. Another little fun trivia in the movie is that it was not filmed in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. It was filmed in Woodstock, Illinois. Bill Murray was also bit twice by Scooter the Groundhog in the car scene. And a young Michael Shannon was in the movie as half of the couple that Phil convinces to get married and then rewards them with WrestleMania tickets. The two announcers that are heard at the beginning of every day are actually played by Brian Doyle Murray and director Harold Ramis. Both of them also have other characters in the film. And lastly, the title Groundhog's Day actually means nothing outside the United States. So internationally, they had really cute titles like Spell of the Weather in Brazil and Monday the Entire Week in Sweden and A Day Without End in France. There's also various statements on Danny Rubin's inspiration for the movie, one of which was thinking about immortality after reading Interview with a Vampire. Another was the 1892 story Christmas Every Day by William Dean Howells. Now, I've read actually both of those, and I can see the themes of repeating over and over and the idea of no end in sight. So let's man the hatches and get ready for our first deep dive into tediousness, or repeating the same task over and over with little break. So in the film, Phil asked two drunk guys in the bowling alley, what would you do if you were stuck in one place and every day was exactly the same and nothing you did mattered? And one of the drunk guy responds, well, that about sums it up for me. There will come a point in your life, and maybe it already has, maybe it's happening now, maybe it's coming, but you'll start to feel like a cog in a wheel. You go to work, you go to school, and every day just feels like the same old thing. I remember having deja vu, stepping onto the bus nearly every day in high school. I was at the same place in line. I used the same steps. I saw the same kids sitting in the same seat, and I hated it. And I hoped that I would just wake up dreaming, still in bed. That tediousness and repetition just absolutely kills me. I'm not good at it, and I actually instinctively just quickly find a way to mix things up and break that monotony. Writing and filmmaking probably intrigued me because even though it's the same basic work and using the same skills and honing those skills, the people, the places, and the subject matter changes from project to project. Now, I've been doing this show for 2.5 years, and it doesn't get repetitive because it's a different movie to talk about and it's different themes to explore. So if you're confused on why we're on episode 10 and I'm saying 2.5 years, check out the 57 episodes I did on D20 Crit with Will Derringer. Those are also up on iTunes, and they are on this YouTube channel as well. But when it comes to Phil's quote, many of us do feel stuck in one place. And that's either due to a mortgage or rent, or that's where your parents live. It's that feeling that nothing you do matters. And that really, really hits you. And that's why social media has caught on so much, because it's that possibility, it's that opportunity of seeing things you do and seeing things that you express mattering in terms of likes. So, but that doesn't last, and it never really seems to be enough. So it's important to point out that when Phil does escape his time loop, it's when he is thanked by people in the town. It really did matter. The people and the place that he was stuck in. When he's no longer stuck in it, he actually chooses to stay. So it's a message of perception that whatever your view of your prison is, might also be your paradise, and vice versa. It's all a matter of perception and consciousness. Now, I don't know if the filmmakers purposely added in the element of Sisyphus or not, but it is there. Sisyphus is a Greek myth of a man who is punished in the afterlife to roll a rock up a hill for all eternity. So philosopher Albert Camus wrote a book called The Myth of Sisyphus, where he talks about Sisyphus pushing that rock up the hill only to see it roll back down. And he says, quote, "In doing that return, that pause, that Sisyphus interests me, that is the hour of consciousness." Camus talks about the choices that Sisyphus makes, again, pushing the rock up the hill, knowing that it's futile, and making that figure tragic. So Phil is also conscious of his days repeating. He still retains what he has learned from previous loops, but of course nobody else does. And we feel sorry for him. And we can relate because we see the tediousness in our own lives, and we relate. It's also kind of harder to relate to a man like Sisyphus, who is forced to push up a boulder up a hill with little chance of success. However, Camus also says this, quote, "We might not be able to change the circumstances we're in or the inherent meaninglessness of the universe and our personal fate, but reflecting on it, on how we choose to interpret it. We can take hold of it and create our own meaning, the same consciousness, which chooses us to feel determined from the absurd, is the tool in which we make our own fate." So when Phil makes meaning out of his time loop, he creates his own fate. And in a sense, he gets that rock up to the top of the hill and over to the other side. And maybe that perception can also be said on our views on movies and our view on life. Maybe it's all meaningless. Movies are just flickering images, quickly moving pictures, reenacting sequences of existence. And maybe movies aren't anything deep. Maybe life is just birth and time and death, and we are a speck of the timeline of the universe existence and extinction. But if you're like me, positively rebellious and rebelliously positive, you interpret life and movies to have a greater meaning. You imprint on them, and you learn why you feel certain things and why you react with tears, indifference, or cheers. Making meaning out of the meaningless is what makes the fate of ourselves our own. It's also extremely personal and extremely powerful. Another element that is in the film that Harold Ramis brings up in an interview is the connection of the film and the practice of psychoanalysis. This could be another layer deep on the Sisyphus myth. Psychoanalysis is the study of the unconscious mind conflicting with the conscious mind. It looks at flickers of the unconscious mind in forgotten memories, irrational drives, dreams, and free association. Psychoanalysts look at patterns of repeating behaviors that deal with repression, love, dependence, anger, all streaming from the unresolved unconscious thinking. There's even an essay that is printed in the International Journal of Psychoanalysis called Revisiting Groundhog's Day, Cinematic Depiction of the Munitive Process. The article is only for paid subscribers, but I did find a quote, and it says, quote, "The film shows us a man trapped in his narcissistic defenses. The device of repetition becomes a representation of developmental arrest and closure from object relatedness. Repetition also becomes a means of escape from his characterological dilemma, the opportunity to redo and learn from experience, in particular, to love and to learn through experience with the good object. It symbolizes the redemptive, reparative possibilities of everyday life." I also thought it was interesting that if you take the motif of Phil the Groundhog trying to see his shadow or not see his shadow, and a man who's also trying to find out what is in his unconscious mind, or his shadow self, if you will. But there's also good old-fashioned themes of trial and error in the film as well. And this is what I do love about this movie. And I love the way that they showed the repeated days. And they gave us a metaphor of trial and error outside a sports metaphor of, let's say, Danielson learning how to do the crane technique. Nothing wrong with that. Just gives us another way of looking at it. One of the longer sequences of trial and error that's in the film is Phil trying to woo Rita. So it's not my favorite, and it feels like a con game where Phil is trying to learn what kind of a man she likes, and then what kind she would go for, and then he tries to be that guy. Not himself, but that guy. A version of superficial bits and pieces that he put together, like knowing her favorite drink or her love of French poetry. And Rita sees through this. She sees the whole day as one big setup. It's not genuine, and she rejects him. The sequence that's actually the most powerful in the trial and error motif is with the homeless man. Many times Phil actually avoids the homeless man when he's asking for a handout, and when he's on his no consequences tirade, he tells him, "Catch you tomorrow." But after spending a genuine day with Rita, he decides to be nice, and he gives the homeless man all his cash. One of the days in the cycle, Phil finds the homeless man at night, and he takes him to the hospital, where he finds out that the old man has died. Phil then spends the next days not accepting that, quote, "some people just die." He feeds the old man soup and breakfast, but he still dies. I want to believe that Phil struggled to save the old man for many days, and it wasn't until he accepted death as part of life that he was able to move on to February 3rd. In fact, the night that Phil gives the old man CPR and he still dies, that next morning, is the last day in his time loop that we see on film. I also see this film as a message for your connection to the outside world becoming muddled when what you really need to do is work on yourself. Even though Phil is self-absorbed and he's very reactionary because he says, I don't even like myself. When you meet a very mean-spirited person who is quick to put others down, know that they're hiding a great hurt, and instead of dealing with it, they are more than happy to project their energy onto you. And it becomes repetitive. Who can I lash out at? Who will cower in my presence? Who can I battle with an exchange of fists or verbal diarrhea? And even if you are not outwardly mean-spirited person, how do you treat yourself? What is your inner voice? Is it kind or is it cruel? Some of us, myself included, have moments of not liking ourselves. And when we do this, the world becomes smaller and almost background noise. So Phil was mean-spirited and he did project his self-loathing onto others. And until he dealt with how he thought about himself and allowed himself to be happy, whether your inner or outer voice is protecting a great hurt, you need to deal with it. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in your own version of Groundhog Day. According to Roger Ebert, there was a long article in The Independent where Groundhog's Day was hailed by religious leaders as the most spiritual film of all time. Now, I can't find this article that Ebert was talking about, but over time it seemingly has become true. Now, the reason Groundhog Day could be seen as a spiritual or religious film could be that there's a scene where Phil thinks he's God. Not the God, but a God. I told you we would come back to it. Now, he feels that he can't die, that he is immortal, and he really wants Rita to believe him. Not so much that he's God, but the fact that he's stuck in a time loop. So he rattles off everything he knows about everybody in the town. And he says, well, maybe the real God uses tricks. Maybe he's not omnipotent. Maybe he's just been around so long that he knows everything. And Harold Ramis actually feared that people were going to hate the film, but instead, Buddhists, Christians, Catholic, Jews, yogis, Jesuits, Falun Wiccans, and more find spiritual elements in this film. And I don't know about you, but that is one beautiful example of how we have far much more in common than we think we do. So for the Christian's perspective, Michael Bronski, a film critic, said in a New York Times article, quote, "The groundhog is clearly the resurrection of Christ, the ever-hopeful renewal of life at springtime, at the same pagan Christian holidays." He said, adding, "And when I say the groundhog is Jesus, I say that with great respect." So for Catholicism, there's an amazing in-depth article about the symbolism of purgatory in the film, and I will link that in the description as well. But Jim Kessel of Top 10 lists off these reasons. Rita being a physical manifestation of a higher god, higher guide, or angel. The homeless man showing us that not all souls can be saved. Ned representing atonement for Phil's past sins. Dante's Inferno references, specifically the third icy cycle of hell that is reserved for gluttons. And Phil learning to play music to sleep Cerberus, the savage beast next door. Absolutely fascinating. For Judaism, there are elements of mitzvah or good deeds that Phil performs at the end of the movie. Well, and it's important to know, at least it was for me, the simple translation of mitzvah is commandment. Deeper still, in the Chazdaic teachings, the word mitzvah comes from the root word tava, which means connection. So not only is Phil doing good deeds and fulfilling a commandment, but he's also connecting with God. I myself am Buddhist, and Harold Ramis was raised Jewish, married a Buddhist, says he feels like a Buddhist, but he does not practice any particular religion. He did say in an interview that his mother-in-law spent 35 years in a Zen monastery, and when the monks saw the film, they loved it, and they thought it was a fundamental Buddhist concept. So the concepts of Buddhism that I see in the film are Samsara. So Samsara is the continual, repetitive cycle of birth and death and a bardo state where humans fixate on this mistaken concept of self. So in the film, the relation would be that Phil is stuck in this bardo state and he doesn't like himself. And in fact, he views himself over others. He has a different perception of himself. So the next theme is accepting suffering as a way of life. And this always sounds bad if you haven't studied Buddhism. But suffering in Buddhism means that life is always changing. It's never the same. So for Phil, he is stuck in the same day, but he's never the same person until he surrenders to the impermanence of the next day and the rest of his life to just be happy in one moment. He's free of his suffering. The next is reincarnation, forced to live in existence over and over and over again until you reach nirvana. So in the film, Phil is reliving the same day over and over again until he reaches enlightenment, which in this case is happiness and selflessness and compassion. So selflessness and compassion is also very much a Buddhist concept as well. And so in the film, Phil's final day is filled with helping others. The kid that falls from the tree, the 3 old ladies with a flat tire, saving Buster from choking, convincing the young couple to get married, and buying a ton of life insurance from Ned Ryerson. When he awakes on February 3rd, he says, "It was the end of a very long day. Is there anything I can do for you today?" And he's continuing the lessons of selflessness and compassion. But no matter what religion you are, experiences, or your perception, Groundhog Day does show you that if you work on yourself and you help others, your worst day can become your best day. So, and I will leave you with this because I adore it when first lines and last lines tie the film together and give it a bigger meaning. The first line of the film is when Phil is giving the weather report. And he says, quote, "Somebody asked me today, Phil, if you could be anywhere in the world today, where would you like to be?" And then he answers by leading into his weather report. The last line of the movie is, "It's so beautiful. Let's live here." So Phil found his answer to, if you could be anywhere in the world today, where would you be? What's your answer? Kate's Take is brought to you by Gal's Guide to the Galaxy. For more information, including links to our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, visit galsguide.org.